Hi everyone, today we're going to be looking at a poem called Ozymandias by Percy Shelley, which is straight out of the AQA Power and Conflict cluster for the new specification English Literature GCSE. In 1817, Percy Shelley and his mate Horace Smith were feeling a bit raucous, so they had a sonnet writing competition. Percy penned his sonnet and called it Ozymandias. Now, given that Ozymandias was the Greek name for Ramses II, an Egyptian pharaoh who ruled between 1279 BC and 1213 BC, and given the fact that around the time that Shelley was writing his sonnet, it was announced that a large fragment of a statue of Ramses II was being transported to England, it seems safe to assume that Shelley used Ramses II as inspiration for his sonnet. Apart from a couple of tricky words and the word hand meaning something other than the thing at the end of your arm, old Percy's poem isn't too difficult really. Still, before we get to the juicy ideas about form and structure that are going to make your exam responses more lit than a firework on bonfire night, we need to make sure that we're on the same page when it comes to the meaning of Big P's sonnet. So what does it mean? Well, we start off being introduced to someone from an antique land by the speaker in the first two lines. The speaker doesn't seem to know this person very well, and that is significant, but we'll get to that in a bit. Right off the bat, the speaker starts recounting what this guy said to him, and we're whisked off to a distant nameless land where this traveller is from. Although the place isn't named, we are given some details about what it is like in lines 3 and 13. Desert, sand, boundless and bare, and level sand stretched far away, all act together to present the place that this guy is from as being pretty barren and empty. Apparently there are two vast and trunkless legs of stone there, and a shattered visage means face, lying in the sand. These are what remains of an ancient statue that represents the poem's namesake Ozymandias, or Ramses II. The traveller then goes on to describe the Ozymandias' statue's face in more detail. It has a frown, a wrinkled lip, and a sneer of cold command, all of which combine to make Oz sound straight up nasty. In lines 6 to 8, we're introduced to the sculptor who made the statue of Ozymandias, who apparently well those passions read. The syntax and phrasing is a bit confusing here. The passions refer to the nasty qualities described in Ozymandias' visage and can be thought of as meaning that he was familiar with those qualities. It's interesting that the sculptor was familiar with these particular passions. Perhaps these were Ozymandias' most obvious qualities, perhaps he was an exceptionally cruel leader, or perhaps the sculptor just didn't like him very much. Regardless, the fact that they yet survive seems to suggest that these qualities are significant. The lifeless things in this line, by the way, refers to the stone that the visage is stamped on. In the next line, the word hand refers to the sculptor, and this again seems to imply that maybe the sculptor is not too keen on Ozymandias. He mocked the passions. The final words in this line, heart that fed, are notoriously difficult to decipher the meaning of, but it is likely referring to what motivated Ozymandias to do the things he did. After describing the statue and sculptor, the traveller then tells the speaker that there is a pedestal with some words on it. My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Here Ozymandias himself is given a voice and issues a warning to others, telling them that they should despair, though whether they should despair because of Ozymandias' power or because they are destined to suffer the same fate as him is unclear, intentionally so. Perhaps he believes it is the former, but in reality it is the latter. Finally, the poem ends with one last jab at Ozymandias' power. The statue representing him is a colossal wreck, and we are given a description of how empty and barren the area around the statue is. Now that we understand what this bad boy's about, we're ready to put together some ideas about what Percy was trying to do when writing this sonnet, other than show up Horace, that is. So what was the poet saying? We're going to try and link everything we talk about within form, language and structure to one key idea raised in this poem, the transience of power. Percy seems to be saying that all political leaders are destined to eventually fall and that ultimately no one is indestructible. All of Ozymandias' might, strength, status and wealth have decayed into nothing. Throughout the whole poem, Ozymandias' power is constantly undermined, from the way his only remaining relic is described as a colossal wreck to the fact that we don't even witness the relic firsthand. We hear about it from the speaker, who hears about it from a traveller who may not even have seen it himself. All of this distances us from Ozymandias, reducing his power. By undermining his power, Shelley is making a statement about the impermanence of power. It seems that he is saying that whilst the leader can be perceived as having true power, eventually they will inevitably fall prey to the same fate as Ozymandias. What can I say about the form then? This is a sonnet. Now there are two types of sonnets, Petrarchan and Shakespearean, and it's interesting that Ozymandias does not conform entirely to either type. It is Petrarchan in the sense that it has an octave and a sestet, but the rhyme scheme is inconsistent with what we'd expect from a Petrarchan sonnet. In fact, it starts with a very Shakespearean ABAB. As the poem progresses, we see the rhyme scheme move away from that typical Shakespearean pattern, and indeed the final 2 lines are not the rhyming couplet we would typically expect from a Shakespearean sonnet. So what? Well, it seems to me that the form here mirrors the ideas. Initially, Ozymandias was a powerful, mighty ruler, but over time, his power and legacy decayed until there was little left save for the ruinous statue described in the poem. Similarly, the poem starts off by appearing as if it is a Petrarchan sonnet. It has an octave and a sestet. But upon closer inspection, we realise that the rhyme scheme, AB, AB, suggests that it is more Shakespearean than Petrarchan. Then as we read further still, we realise that even this is not the case, and this expectation slips away too, just like Ozymandias' power. What can I say about the structure? We can see similarities between the points we made about the form and the pattern in the metre of the poem. It's written in pentameter, which means that lines are made up of 5 groups of 2 syllables. You've probably heard about iambic pentameter, which means that each pair of syllables goes unstressed, stressed, like in this line. Half sunk, a shattered visage lies whose frown. And there are a few lines which are written in iambic pentameter, which makes it tempting to label the poem in this way. But in actual fact, some of the lines are not in iambic pentameter. For instance, line 12. Nothing beside remains round the decay. And so once more, just as we saw with the Petrarchan Shakespearean hybrid form, the metre of the poem starts off as one thing and then changes, or decays. Both the form and the metre of the poem are transient, just like political power. What can I say about the language? Well, the first thing to say about the language is that the whole poem is a metaphor for the ephemeral nature of political power. The statue represents this power, and in its state of ruin represents its impermanence. If you want to refer to the fact that the poem itself is a metaphor in your responses, try to remember a couple of quotations which describe Ozymandias' statue in its final state, perhaps shattered visage or trunkless legs of stone. Ozymandias' power is undermined throughout the poem, as we said before, and this is accomplished through language. The fact that the poem starts with, "I met a traveller from an antique land," and that it is from this person that we learn of Ozymandias' power, undermines that same power. He is not significant enough for us to already know of him. We have to learn of him through a third person. The third person who does tell us of Ozymandias' power is from an antique land. By association, then, Ozymandias' power is antiquated and only known of in far-off lands. Ozymandias' power is also undermined when he is given his own voice. He instructs the readers of the Pedestal to "look on my works, ye mighty, and despair." As mentioned earlier, it seems that this is intentionally ambiguous. We're unsure whether Ozymandias is referring to the current state of his works, or how they were at the time when the Pedestal message was written. Either way, it's a stark warning for those who would seek to wield political power. The double meaning of this line again serves to undermine Ozymandias' power further still. Shelley also uses alliteration and rhyme in Ozymandias to mirror the cyclical nature of political power. There are loads of examples of alliteration and rhyme. They're repeated throughout the poem, just like history repeats itself with political power. If you want to refer to this in your responses, just pick an alliterative quotation, cold command or boundless and bare, and a couple of rhyming words, decay and away, for example. In the line directly after the Pedestal quote, we're told that nothing beside remains. Now, you'll get really good value from memorising this quote. It's great as an example of a line which is not written in iambic pentameter, nothing beside remains, and the caesura here emphasises the permanence of Ozymandias' descent from power. Finally, the transient nature of power is juxtaposed by the permanence of art and culture in this poem. It is significant that all that remains of Ozymandias' reign is a statue, which is obviously a work of art. In fact, we're even made to appreciate the skill of the sculptor at capturing life within art. He created his art on a canvas of lifeless things, successfully capturing Ozymandias' passions in mere lifeless rocks, which survive long after Ozymandias' reign has ended. Once you feel you've gotten to grips with this poem, have a go at answering the following question. Feel free to message me your responses for some feedback. How does Shelley create a negative impression of the ruler Ozymandias in this poem?